Welcome back to our channel on this beautiful day. We are thrilled to bring you the latest, most intense updates from Genoa City. The drama is reaching unprecedented heights, and the emotional stakes have never been higher for our favorite characters. Settle in as we dive deep into the harrowing psychological journey of a man standing at the edge of the abyss. The suffocating atmosphere of a dingy motel room serves as the grim backdrop for Nick Newman's rapid descent into a personal hell, a stark contrast to the opulent lifestyle he was born into. Surrounded by the scattered remnants of his shattered sobriety, Nick finds himself entirely consumed by the very demons he has spent years trying to outrun. The small packets of fentanyl resting on the bedside table are a terrifying testament to his surrender, a physical manifestation of his inability to cope with the crushing weight of the Newman family legacy. As his phone screen illuminates the dark room with relentless, unanswered messages from Sharon and Victoria, Nick makes the tragic choice to ignore the lifelines being thrown his way. He opts instead for the numbing oblivion of the drugs, allowing the toxic chemicals to drag him under into a deep, unnatural sleep. However, the escape he seeks is violently denied, replaced by a labyrinthine nightmare that forces him to confront the absolute worst consequences of his addiction. The dreamscape begins with a chilling sense of disorientation, guided by the sinister phantom of Matt Clark, who acts as a twisted Virgil leading Nick through the inferno of his own making. Matt's presence in the hallucination is a cruel reminder of the historical trauma inflicted upon the Newman family, a trauma that Nick is now mirroring through his own destructive choices. The nightmare thrusts Nick into the driver's seat of a speeding vehicle, the world outside blurring into a chaotic smear of terrifying colors and distorted shapes. Beside him sits a hallucinated version of Sharon, her usually vibrant spirit hollowed out and replaced by a vacant, drug-induced euphoria that Nick himself is responsible for creating. The psychological horror of seeing the mother of his children reduced to a fellow addict under his influence is paralyzing, setting the stage for the visceral terror that is about to unfold within the confined space of the speeding car. Without warning, the atmosphere inside the vehicle shifts from chaotic to lethal as a sudden, violent force erupts from the back seat. Nick feels the phantom sensation of strong, unforgiving hands wrapping tightly around his throat, cutting off his oxygen, and sending him into a state of sheer panic. He thrashes against the restraint, his eyes catching the rearview mirror only to see the contorted, rage-filled face of his brother, Adam Newman. The ambush is brutal and entirely unexpected, a physical manifestation of the deep-seated animosity and unresolved conflicts that have defined their brotherhood for decades. Adam's grip is relentless, driven by a primal fury that transcends mere sibling rivalry, transforming the confined space of the car into a deadly trap. The violent struggle causes Nick to lose all control of the steering wheel, sending the vehicle careening off the road into a terrifying plunge toward an inevitable, catastrophic impact that shatters the dreamscape into a million jagged pieces. When the world reconstructs itself, Nick is no longer in the wreckage of the car, but standing in the cold, imposing foyer of the Newman Ranch, a place that usually represents absolute power and familial protection. However, the grand estate is now a theater of unimaginable grief, echoing with the heart-wrenching sobs of Chelsea Lawson and the terrifying, apocalyptic rage of Adam. The devastating truth of this hallucination is hurled at Nick with the force of a physical blow. Adam and Chelsea, their faces twisted in absolute agony, scream the horrifying reality that their beloved son, Connor, is dead. The nightmare forces Nick to process the unimaginable scenario that his own careless addiction has claimed the life of his innocent nephew. The narrative woven by his subconscious reveals that Connor, driven by a child's innocent curiosity, discovered Nick's carelessly hidden stash of fentanyl, leading to a fatal, accidental overdose that has forever destroyed their family. The psychological weight of this imagined tragedy crushes Nick, forcing him to experience the ultimate manifestation of his deepest, darkest fears. He is forced to stand trial before his grieving brother and a shattered mother, possessing absolutely no defense for the catastrophic negligence that led to the loss of a child. Adam's fury is not just the anger of a grieving father, but the righteous vengeance of a man who has finally found the ultimate proof of his brother's inherent toxicity. The historical context of their rivalry, the years of fighting for their father's approval and moral high ground, all culminate in this singular, unforgivable sin. Nick's internal monologue is a cacophony of self-loathing and despair, a horrifying realization that his attempt to escape his own pain has resulted in the ultimate destruction of the people he was supposed to protect, cementing his status as the true villain of the Newman family narrative. The punishment in this nightmare extends far beyond the unbearable guilt of Connor's death, as Adam and Chelsea deliver a final, devastating ultimatum that strikes at the very core of Nick's remaining humanity. With cold, unwavering resolve, they declare that they are immediately taking Christian away from him, severing the last fragile bond that ties Nick to a sense of purpose and fatherhood. Adam asserts his biological right to the boy, not out of spite, but out of a desperate, undeniable necessity to protect his remaining child from the lethal orbit of Nick's addiction. The realization that he is being entirely stripped of his parental rights, that he is universally deemed an active threat to the child he raised, sends Nick into a spiraling panic. He is losing everything that anchors him to sanity, watching helplessly as his family actively builds a fortress to keep him out, treating him not as a son or a brother, but as a dangerous contagion that must be eradicated. Driven by a blinding, suffocating desperation, Nick flees the oppressive judgment of the ranch, his subconscious transporting him to the chaotic, pulsing environment of the Shadow Room. The nightclub is a sensory overload of flashing lights and deafening music, a perfect representation of the chaotic turmoil raging within his mind. Nick frantically navigates the crowded dance floor, his eyes scanning the sea of faceless strangers in a desperate, heartbreaking search for Cassie. She is his ultimate symbol of lost innocence and elusive redemption, the one person whose forgiveness might pull him back from the brink of total annihilation. He hopes that finding her ghost in this neon-lit purgatory will provide some semblance of comfort, a guiding light to lead him out of the darkness of his own making. Instead of finding his beloved daughter, Nick's frantic search leads him directly into the sinister, waiting embrace of his drug dealer, a shadowy figure who represents the seductive, destructive power of his addiction. The dealer offers a sinister smile and the promise of immediate relief, tempting Nick to surrender entirely to the void and forget the horrors he has just witnessed at the ranch. Just as Nick's resolve begins to crumble under the weight of the temptation, the hallucination shifts again, bringing his mother, Nikki Newman, into the chaotic fray. Nikki intervenes with a fierce, maternal desperation, physically placing herself between her broken son and the poison that is actively destroying him. For a fleeting moment, Nick feels a surge of hope, believing that his mother's enduring love might be the anchor he needs to survive the storm of his own creation. However, the nightmare is relentless in its cruelty, and the fragile moment of maternal intervention is violently shattered by the imposing, thunderous arrival of Victor Newman. The patriarch's presence immediately dominates the space, his voice booming with a crushing, absolute disappointment that cuts Nick deeper than any physical wound. Victor does not offer comfort or support. Instead, he unleashes a torrent of harsh reprimands, berating Nick for succumbing to the very weaknesses that have plagued their family for generations. The true horror of the scene is revealed when Nikki, her spirit broken by Victor's relentless accusations, confesses that she and Victor have separated once again. The devastating twist is that Victor has placed the entirety of the blame on Nikki, accusing her of being the toxic influence that led to Nick's spectacular downfall, effectively destroying their marriage over Nick's failures. The psychological torture reaches its absolute zenith as Nick is forced to watch the catastrophic fallout of his actions unfold before his very eyes. Nikki, shattered by the loss of her marriage and the agonizing reality of her son's self-destruction, turns away from Victor and approaches the bar with a chilling sense of finality. In a move that paralyzes Nick with pure, unadulterated terror, Nikki surrenders to her own lifelong demons, ordering a double vodka from the bartender. Nick screams internally, his body frozen in the dreamscape, completely unable to reach out and snatch the glass from her trembling hand. He is forced to bear witness as his mother, the woman who fought so hard for her own sobriety, takes the fatal sip, plunging back into the abyss of alcoholism because the pain of loving him has simply become too much to bear. The neon lights of the club dissolve into the grim, familiar reality of the motel room, though Nick remains trapped within the confines of his hallucination. Standing amidst the squalor of his temporary prison is his sister, Victoria Newman, her pristine, authoritative presence serving as a stark, unforgiving contrast to his filth and degradation. Nick falls to his knees, his voice cracking as he makes desperate, tearful promises to change, swearing that he will get clean, return to the family, and become the man they all need him to be. He begs for her belief, desperate for validation that he is not entirely lost. But Victoria remains cold, her expression a mask of corporate stoicism, and sibling exhaustion. She delivers a stern, unwavering warning, making it abundantly clear that his empty words hold absolutely no value anymore. She demands tangible action, reminding him that the Newman family does not survive on apologies, but on results, leaving Nick feeling smaller and more inadequate than ever before. The suffocating pressure of Victoria's judgment, combined with the lingering horrors of Connor's death and Nikki's relapse, finally pushes Nick's subconscious to its absolute breaking point. The walls of the motel room seem to close in on him, the air growing thick and unbreathable as a crescendo of internal screaming threatens to tear his mind apart. Suddenly, the psychological torment is pierced by a sharp, rhythmic sound from the waking world. A frantic, relentless knocking at the motel room door begins to pull Nick upward through the thick layers of his drug-induced coma. He jolts awake in a cold, shivering sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped animal, his lungs gasping for air as the terrifying images of his nightmare continue to bleed into the shadows of the real world. Trembling and completely disoriented, Nick stumbles across the room, the sound of his own residual screaming still echoing in his ears. He reaches the door, his hand shaking violently as he turns the deadbolt and pulls it open, expecting to find the police, his furious father, or perhaps the lingering ghosts of his hallucination. Instead, standing under the flickering neon light of the motel walkway is Marie Kirkland. Her expression is a chilling mixture of feigned concern and calculating observation. She calmly mentions that she heard him screaming through the thin walls, her voice soft but carrying an undertone of dangerous intent. As she steps closer, asking if he has anything he wants to share about his night terrors, Nick is left staring into the eyes of his newest enabler. The nightmare has ended, but as he stands vulnerable and broken before a woman actively plotting his demise, the true horror of his reality is only just beginning.